Okay, good evening, councillors. Welcome to this evening's Overview and Scrutiny Committee held here in the Town Hall at Bexhill on the 8th of September, just after 6 o'clock. First item on the agenda, minutes. Do I have your authorisation to sign as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of this committee held on the 7th of July 2025 as a correct record of those proceedings?
So move.
Much. All happy? Yep. Excellent. Thank you. Item 2, well, I suppose we better go through. I've got a few members online. We have Councillor Maynard, Councillor Creaser, who are members of the committee, and then we have Jimmy Stranger and Tony Biggs and Councillor Colleen, and I think that's probably all I can see. I will say before I go to the second item of apologies and substitutions, Councillors Barnes in the plural are stuck in traffic near Who due to an accident. Not their accident, I wouldn't think, but there may be some time.
And we've had apologies from Councillor McGurk.
Yep, okie dokie. Additional agenda items, there are none. Item 4, disclosure of interest and dispensation. To receive any disclosures by members of disciplinary, pecuniary interests, other registrable interest, non-registrable interest in matters on the agenda, nature of the interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question. Councillor Thomas.
Chair of the Housing Company.
Okay. Councillor Bird. Okay. Councillor Burton.
Out of the habit, Battletown Council.
Right.
If it's relevant.
And Councillor Cook, same. I'm a member. I'm the chairman of Playden Parish Council, but I'm not going to declare an interest because we don't do much. And we don't have any assets from Rother in our patch. We hardly have a road in our patch, which is just as well. We don't have to worry about it. Councillor Maynard as well. I assume East Sussex County Council and anything else.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. It's just obviously the standing declaration that I usually make because if I don't make it, East Sussex County Council will come up, and if I do, it's just erring on the side of caution. So non-prejudicial, but just declare that I am a executive member of East Sussex County Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, that's that one. Right, item 5, homelessness and rough sleeping strategy 2025 to 2030, pages 3 to 106. If I seem out of sync, I didn't attend the chairman's briefing because I was stuck in, well, I wasn't stuck, well, I was stuck in London. So I didn't get home in time. So Councillor Mrs Cook took it in on my behalf. So thanks to Councillor Cook for that. But I'll have a briefing note here. So Joe will introduce the report. Or Councillor McCall will introduce the report. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me to speak to the committee about this strategy. I speak in favour of it. It's a really good strategy, so I thank the officers for their hard work and going through the consultation process and all that. I think the themes, the 5 key themes that are identified in the strategy are really on the ball and really, cogent and worthy of support by the council as a whole. Reducing homelessness via early intervention and prevention. Obviously, that's something that happens already, but it's something that we need to upscale. Increasing housing accessibility, improving the quality and supply of temporary accommodation, reducing homelessness and rough sleeping for people with multiple compound needs, and improving the quality and suitability of housing. Those are all overarching themes which we need to get on with, and we need to start working towards them. But I think we also got to mention the context and the challenges in which we sit. Homelessness has increased from 216 presentations in 2017-18 to 571 in 23-24. In 2015, we had 30 households in temporary accommodation. We now have over 200. There's an urgent demand for one-bed accommodation and 3 beds at the other end of the scale for the older demographic, of 1 bed certainly. And there's a need for cheaper rented accommodation. Average rents of over £1,000 a month in August 24. That represented a 6.2% rise since the previous year. But we have had some successes. I mean, I think since 2019, acquiring 69 units of temporary accommodation, including 12 housing first accommodation for those with complex needs, hopefully 75 units by October 25, and of course 130 affordable homes via the Rother Housing Company at the site in Blackfriars, which is excellent news. And I just heard this evening that they're ahead of schedule in the works there, which is excellent news, I think, really. I think also working with East Sussex County Council to access supported accommodation will continue. The Rough Sleeping Initiative, the funding that helps fund access to occupational therapists, social workers, is to be welcomed. And the things that we're doing already, such as the off-street offer of 3 units of temporary accommodation for up to 28 days for verified rough sleepers who are in non-priority need, is excellent. And we also fund 2 homeless prevention officers with the homelessness prevention grant. And of course, the tenant finder scheme is also to be lauded, which assists people with finding homes in the private rented sector. We have 2 PRS officers. So I like the emphasis in this strategy also on a shared whole systems approach with East Sussex County Council, Public Health, NHS, ESFT, and that's to be lauded as well. Worryingly, the Section 21 notices have become an issue. Hopefully with the Renters Act, that will be diminishing as that will be set aside. So overall, I applaud the actions, setting up a homelessness prevention hub in Bexhill, with Advice Food Bank, etc., on the RVA premises. I think continuing the low-income family tracker so we can intervene at the earliest opportunity for people who are at risk of falling into debt and homelessness. Working with the CAB 1066 to identify funding likely to qualify for things like energy support. All these things are interlinked, and I would say that the strategy, although it focuses on homelessness, it probably should be read in tandem with the housing development strategy, because increasing the general supply of homes, as we know, is the only sure way to really tackle homelessness. I also like the emphasis on a trauma-informed approach to homelessness, working and learning from Changing Futures partners and their lived experience role. I think if we can listen to and learn from the people who have a lived experience of homelessness and insecurity of housing, it will really strengthen our approach going forward. Changing Futures Sussex Peer Navigator role is an example of this. So that's all I'll say at the moment, because I'm sure the officers will answer questions. There's only one query about, I know it will happen at some stage, but having timeline targets against some of the objectives and the outcomes is something I didn't see in the appendix, but I know they will happen because that's the way we do things. So thank you, Chair, for that.
Thank you. I see, Charlie, I'll get you in a minute. I see we've got Caroline here, so because you obviously wrote it, and you probably put most of the work into it. So thanks for that. Councillor Clark, anything you want to say as a previous spokesman?
Yeah, I just wanted to make some comments on the key themes. There's nothing you can't dispute it, and I see the public are fully agreeable with that. One, reducing homeless early intervention. I know over the years this council has been quite successful with early engagement and preventing quite a few issues that would have meant homelessness. Congratulate them on that. Increasing housing accessibility, well, we all want that. 3, slightly improving the supply and quantity of temporary accommodation. Well, properties we're buying, obviously we know are of good quality, but I don't know what you exactly mean. Is that for private accommodation we have to use and make sure it's of a good standard? Is that what it means? Improving the quality and suitability of housing. We've got a strong environmental strategy on housing to make sure that future housing is of a high standard. Just going to throw one thing in though, which I'm not quite sure it's in this bit, but there's a comment there about one bed accommodation required for older people. It's also required for young people, because we all know there's a huge amount of young people in their 30s, even 40s, still living home with their parents because they can't afford to get on the ownership ladder, and that's an issue that I think needs addressing as well as worrying about the elderly. And the other problem with the elderly is a lot of them are in three-bed accommodation and they won't accept an offer of one-bed flat, or they've been there so long they feel they want to hold on to that property. Unfortunately, that doesn't help young families on the ladder who'd be more suited to that accommodation. Thank you.
Joe or Caroline, do you want to respond?
I was just going to say that, which I totally agree, that it's important for both ends of the spectrum and all the way across. But it's just a comment, really, I think, because this last year or two, we've really seen an increase in the age of some of the applicants we've got. Like, it would be really rare previously to have someone in their 80s approach us as homeless and end up in temporary accommodation or be discharged from hospital in that circumstance. But we've had a really big increase in that, and I suppose it's particularly unsettling where we need to organise a massive package of cares for those people to come into a temporary accommodation. It's something we don't like doing, so we're trying to increase the availability of stock, whereas I suppose some of the younger people are able to access most accommodation, where Bexhill presents quite a lot of issues with steps as well, in terms of accessing properties. So really.
And on the TA quality and standards, yes, it does refer in part to our own acquisition. That's a key outcome of our own acquisitions, is that we're raising the quality of accommodation that people are offered temporarily. But we're also working with our county-wide partners to look at a joint enforcement approach as part of our East Sussex Housing Partnership Strategy, which is about to be brought forward and be at Cabinet in November time, which is a collaborative strategy between the 5 districts and boroughs in East Sussex, alongside our health and social care partners and criminal justice partners. And one of the key themes in there is about collaborating more on standards and temporary accommodation of third-party providers, private sector providers, which are generally good. And we as an authority, inspect all the ones that we use, but we know, I don't think any other local authority does that in the same way that we do. And we also demand of them evidence of their statutory compliance. Again, I think we're alone in doing that in East Sussex anyway. So we're keen to keep that momentum and have a shared role, which would typically sit in environmental health teams usually, that would be enforcing standards on temporary accommodation specifically and exclusively.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on it? Councillor Cook?
Thank you very much, Chair. I did write to you, Joe, with these questions in advance, but I still think if it's all right with you, I'll read them out. So on page 5 of the document, in paragraph 17, we read that most of the respondents suggested a change of order of the key themes. This isn't reflected in the strategy document, will it be?
Yes, it's a bit complicated, just in terms of logistics, because it's not. All the changes need to go back to Homeless Link, who drafted the strategy, to update them for us. But they will be, most importantly, they will be updated in the action plan, which is the scheduling the works we're going to do, and that sort of maybe leads to the comment that Councillor McCourt made in terms of them not being dates against all those things. We purposely didn't do that. We went with the main theme, which was reducing homelessness through early intervention and prevention, and put dates in to achieve things there, because we're fairly certain that would remain the main priority. The others now will be looked at in the priority as per the consultation. But it was to say also that the consultation didn't receive a massive response. But yeah, they will be, and they'll be updated shortly with some targets around the dates and things.
Thank you. And can I ask a question? It was something that Councillor John Barnes was particularly concerned about, discharged prisoners. They didn't seem to have a particular mention.
I had a look. We had some quite a significant response from somebody in the probation service, who we speak to fairly regularly anyway. And I think there's a fair amount in there. It's about the work we already do. we've committed to a few things recently which probably have happened beyond the production of some of the strategy, just to reassure, that we've guaranteed that we will interview everybody who we're able to whilst they're still in prison, which then allows the probation or prison service to look for alternate accommodation, which is this, they've got community accommodation service, which is a sort of step down, the one below sort of an approved premises, where people who've got nowhere to go on discharge can go for 84 days to help with accommodation. So we've committed to that to try and, because otherwise they can't request that until they've had a homeless assessment. So we're doing a lot more work up front, and we've got some of the work that we've done with East Sussex in terms of the end of some of the services they've had in place. So they were commissioning floating support, which we were using extensively, and people will be aware that they've cut the funding significantly to that service. So we, at the moment, are going to continue to fund 3 posts, and one of those will be specifically working with trying to find outcomes for complex people with complex needs, but particularly prison leavers, because obviously they're by far our hardest group to find accommodation for, I would say.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. And I think the final question we wanted to ask was, after somebody leaves temporary accommodation, whether they're going into housing or whether they've moved away from the area, do we sort of interview them and get a sort of a debrief and a feedback about their experience?
Yeah, for all the people who've been our own temporary accommodation, they're all surveyed on exit, where they'll and we will be starting to roll that out to people who have been in other accommodation as well, so we can get a wider picture of it. And it's also been picked up with some of the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years with Shelter, who are sort of doing some mystery shopping and talking to clients to try and get their view. But I feel like it's a really useful tool to us to work to make the services better going forward, I suppose. Look at people's experiences.
That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, both of you.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of councillors in the room and one online, so I'm going to go with Councillor Creaser online before I forget her. Councillor Creaser, if you're there.
How could you possibly forget me? Anyway, I just say I apologise for not being there tonight, but quite a few of you know of my personal situation. So I have to say that I take my hat off to Caroline. She works tirelessly. Should I show our officer? Oh, never mind. She works tirelessly to do the best she possibly can with a very, very constrained situation. One of the things that I, as a former housing practitioner, have been aware of, particularly in the local authorities that I worked with, is that in order to free up 3 or 2, 3, 4 bedroom homes that are no longer really needed for that particular resident, with an alternative that works for them. So I think we still need a bit of work, not from us or our officers, because they do as much as they possibly can, but it does cause a bit of a logjam. I don't hear very much about former service personnel, and obviously, again, people who have come through the criminal justice situation, they have rights, but when you've got people who are potentially given a great deal for this country, they don't seem to be quite so carefully considered. So I am very concerned as ever, and I think that the push at the moment, we're at the forefront of that. We're obviously a very, very successful local authority. A lot of our situation is way above the national average, so that's great. But we also are very constrained with a very large geographical area with a very small availability for us to redevelop. And of course, that's a problem that we come across in planning all the time. So thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Joe, for all the hard work you do and the impossible task that you have, and you do that with grace and diplomacy. And obviously, Councillor Court, he is doing an outstanding job in a very difficult situation, and I really am as an individual and a local resident, very grateful for that. But I think that there are certain things, it isn't just older persons. I mean, I'm constantly reminded here locally in Rye about the number of properties in the older persons facilities that are empty. And that seems to be a bit of another bit of a logjam. And sometimes where you have other disciplines, particularly adult social care, where they're not joining up. I'm not seeing joined up thinking to be able to support people. So if you had somebody older, as we all know quite frequently, who is in a bigger home, we need to offer them something that is agreeable. It's no good giving somebody in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and unfortunately I'm one of those things, the opportunity to change their family home to somewhere that's completely outside of their family groups and stuff like that, away from what they're used to. And I think we need to find a way to encourage whoever makes all these decisions, which I'm assuming is government, to reconsider a more practical approach to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I will go to Councillor Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to start by saying what an amazingly comprehensive document this is, and all credit to Caroline, to Joe, and to Councillor McCaw. It really is a wonderful document, full of ideas. Every single possible way of tackling this seems to have been thought of and is being attempted. I just want to stress 2 points. The first point has already been made. Let me go a little bit. There we go. There are disadvantages in leaning in. But what I would like to stress is the importance of the Renters' Rights Bill. Because if that actually is implemented, people know about it and they take advantage of the rights under that bill, then hopefully the number of people becoming homeless will be reduced. So all the council can do to let people know about the provisions of that bill, I think the more they can do in that way, the fewer people should become homeless in the first place. So that's the first point. The second point is, I was talking to a colleague this morning about suicide prevention. And there is a very, very close link between being made homeless and finally committing suicide. It is very often the precipitating factor that makes all the difference. And so I'm particularly pleased to see that where you've got your 12 properties under Housing First, you have accommodation and support for rough sleepers with multiple and compound needs. And at Hug, at the moment, they have 40 people on their books, and every single one of them has suffered major trauma in their childhoods. So I really want to stress that point, that if we want to actually have leverage in relation to this, this is a particular group of people who are very vulnerable and where the vulnerability could have very serious consequences. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I too echo this. There's personnel, there's officers, there's interagency working in relation to this whole piece of work, which is excellent to see. I was very interested to hear Caroline's comment about the over 80s. And we are caring for our residents. And the thing that people may not realise is those people are the people who in the past would have probably gone to a care home. So although it's a lot of work and the selection of properties to match their disabilities, it is actually really, really worthwhile. Thank you.
And Councillor Barnes, who, for the benefit of the tape, Councillors Barnes, plural, have arrived. John.
Yes, apologies. We ran into a major car crash and the lanes round Bexhill are totally clogged. I do apologise for being late. I apologise, therefore, if I repeat anything that's been said before. This was one of the great successes of the years since 2019, and I think Joe and his team deserve every credit for that. It's good to see it split off from the housing strategy now, so we can give it attention, the full attention that it really deserves. I make no apology for urging us to go on buying our own properties because financially that is much more beneficial to this authority. And I think we need to keep that programme going. There may come a time when incomes have recovered and house prices are lower than they were, but at the moment rents are sky high and people's incomes simply won't match them. So there is going to be ongoing homelessness. Indeed, I think we may, although this is part of an earlier strategy, we may have to consider building our own houses again. But that's for another day. I wanted just to urge again that we look at this problem of the older person rattling around in a large house. It's not simply that they can't downsize, but in many ways that represents family capital that they want to hand on to the next generation. What we should be doing is using adult social care to encourage such people to buddy up in one or other of their houses, and that will overcome a great deal of social loneliness that is going on. But to make that possible, we really need to lease those houses on the basis that the lease will be terminated when, in fact, that person dies. There's usually ample time at that stage because of probate to rehouse anybody who needs rehousing. But it seems to me we need to be imaginative here and find a way of bringing these houses into use on a temporary basis. Frankly, as an 80-year-old, I'm always surprised how fit and how well most 80-year-olds are. But there will come a day when they die, and if we can somehow have eased that last period loneliness by having a leasing scheme, then I think it'd be a good thing. So I would urge Joe to look at that constructively and see what we can do. The other area I would welcome Joe's comment on is what we're doing for discharged prisoners, because we all know that people who've committed a crime, gone in on a short sentence, but if we don't actually get them back into the community in houses and with jobs, they are likely to offend again and eventually go into a life of crime. So I think I would welcome particular attention to knowing what we're doing about that to try to prevent recidivism. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Would you have an answer to that one, Joe, or is that something you can work on?
Well, the second one, thank you, Councillor Barnes. The latter point, Caroline answered while you were on your way through the lanes. So we can certainly repeat some of that, perhaps outside the meeting, Councillor, just to reassure you. We have a written response for you in any case. On the former point relating to care and asset, the motivation for people to retain their family homes. It's certainly a good idea, and one you've raised with us before, and we do have it on our list at the county level again, because of the interface with the integrated care system, the social care and health piece. I think it's something that we would like to be feeding into that wider conversation, because really a lot of the time those conversations are being had with social care services with those people affected who we don't tend to come into contact with adequately housed mortgage-free homeowners. They tend to not reach us. So it would be a partnership endeavour, and it does feature alongside the need to downsize in social housing as well. So these are active conversations. It does require a bit more joined up working though. As I say, the new integrated care teams that are going to start being rolled out in the next year or so, and we've been working on GPs and the old primary care network for the Rother area. So I'm positive that can feature in there. There are challenges in that model, but I think there's good ideas there, and it complements the social housing approach as well. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, I don't think there's been too many holes picked in this, because it's a very good document. So our sort of purpose of the report: consider and recommend the homelessness and rough sleeping strategy 2025-2030 to Cabinet for approval and onward recommendation for adoption by full council following a public consultation. So I'm pretty sure that we're happy with it as it is. Can I ask, how long do you think the public consultation will be? Will it be a 4-week, 6-week period?
The consultation's already taken place. So it was 6 weeks, yeah. So, so this strategy now just reflects a few changes that we made.
I kept thinking it had been out, because we said that's how many responses we had. But then following that, I suppose it should have said they're following the public consultation as opposed to following public consultation.
Yeah.
Anyway, right. So we're happy to refer this to Cabinet. Someone want to move it? Councillor
Happy to
Cook,
move, Chair.
and seconded by Councillor Barnes. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your work and attendance. Thank you. Item 6, performance report, first quarter, 2025-26, pages 107 to 120. Purpose of the report: to monitor delivery of the Council's key performance indicators, make any necessary recommendations to Cabinet. Officer recommendations: resolve that this committee consider these findings and recommend any actions to Cabinet as necessary. My little script note here. Anna to introduce the report. Anna.
Thank you. So it's the performance report for the first quarter of this council year. I was going to highlight a few changes in the report. So there are a couple of changes to the key performance indicators. So you'll see the estates KPI, the expected income from all assets has increased by 2%. So that's one change. The other change is there are 2 new planning KPIs, and they are specifically about extensions of time in terms of planning applications. I'm going to come back to that one in a bit, because our planning head of service, Mike, my colleague next to me, has a few concerns about the wording of those KPIs, and it isn't actually very clear what it's all about when you first read them. So I'll come back to that, but I'll just continue with what's changed. I've included in this report some benchmarking data. This is all the benchmarking data that I can get, but I know that members have asked for some comparative data in the past. So you'll see I've put that in the table where I can. I've also talked about the government consultation on the new outcomes framework, and I've included a link if anyone would like to have a look at it. The consultation is going on at the moment, and our officers are involved in the webinars that are taking place to shape that. Across the board, performance is generally very good. There's just a few areas that I'll go into where I've got either red or amber traffic light symbol on them. And I must apologise, we've got 2 pieces of information that are missing. One of them is the percentage of customer inquiries resolved at first contact. This is expected to be good, but we've had some problems with our telephone system over the last few months, which has made that data difficult to get hold of. But when we come to do the next performance report, I'll rectify that. The other bit of missing information is the average cost of placing a family in temporary accommodation. I have got that information, but not with me, so I'll make sure that I circulate that separately and again update the report for the next time. So moving on to the areas of performance that are slightly less than where we would like it to be, you'll see that it's the percentage of freedom of information requests answered in 20 days. We should achieve 100%, but it's running at around 75%. We are confident that this will improve over the coming months because we've got some support in this area. But you'll see from my narrative that there are various reasons that it's less than 100%. One was about problems with the software and that cases weren't being counted or entered correctly. But we are confident that that will improve. The next one is environmental health. We are slightly less than where we should be on the 90% of scheduled food inspections carried out. Performance is 64%, but we had one key member of staff and their position was vacant, but we've now filled that vacancy. And finally, and this is where I will ask my colleague to talk a little bit more, planning, the extensions of time, the 2 KPIs. Committee did approve this KPI, but Mike, do you want to speak a little bit more about the wording of it and how useful it is? Is that okay if we do that, Chair? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anna. So yeah, you'll see in your packs that on page 117 to 118, we've got targets P1 to P4 inclusive. They're not the ones that I'm proposing to change. 3 out of 4 of those are more stringent than government targets. So it's just important to say that. What I'm talking about here is P5 and P6. And members will be familiar with one of the metrics which the government uses to determine the effectiveness of planning authorities is how quickly they determine applications. And, I understand that because generally householders, for example, should get decisions issued quickly. The actual speed targets haven't changed for 30 plus years, despite the increasing complexity of the planning system, which certainly planning committee members will see sort of month in, month out. What extensions of time are? They have to be mutually agreed. An applicant doesn't have to agree it. They can say, no, you have to stick to your original time frame. Most local planning authorities rely on extensions of time, particularly for major developments. If you've got a major development that you're likely to be approving with a Section 106 for affordable housing, for example, doing that within the 13-week timescale is extraordinarily challenging, and any sort of head of service in planning would say that to you. We do overuse extensions of time at the moment, and I do want to be very clear about that, and we're trying to reduce our reliance on extensions of time. And we are upgrading our IT system in planning in the coming weeks, and that should help us with that. It does explicitly, hopefully, make validation quickly. It can annoy people if we overuse extensions of time, but also it avoids people potentially, if there's an issue, they need to commission a tree report, they can have an extra 2-3 weeks. And of course, I would remind members that applicants don't get a free go anymore. It used to be the case a couple of years ago where if we refused something and you came back with the same thing, you didn't have to pay the fee again. You do have to pay the fee again now. And I've also been in the private sector when these extensions of time. So if they're used appropriately, then they're very, very sensible. If they're overused, then they will annoy. In terms of P5 and P6, they don't have any basis in government metrics at all. So the government are looking at extensions of time at the moment, and they are explicitly coming with a new planning performance system in the coming months and year or so. The government are looking at that. So what I would sort of suggest to you, and as a new head of service putting this into the debate, is actually that we either delete P5 and P6 as going beyond government metrics, and we see what the government come back with and we update with that. Or if you're not comfortable to do that, that we simplify it down to one target that applies to all applications, rather than doing it by majors and householders, for example. So that's what I would suggest to you. As I say, we do overuse them at the moment. I think it's much more important that when we see the government's new metrics that we reflect this in here. I haven't seen any other council, actually, to be fair, express P5 and P6 in these ways. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. It's quite interesting because I know sort of in Rye there's could be argued a contentious application for a new supermarket, and it seems to be continually making a sort of local online newspaper. And that's been floating around for a year. And now they've put in another application, which seems to be exactly the same as the previous one. But to me, you look at it and you think, well, this isn't the fault of RDC. This could be argued it's the fault of the applicant or Highways England or somebody else, because you know they need to sort of get the road sorted out. So Highways England don't sort of respond as quickly as they might do. So that sort of makes it drag on. But the one at the end of the line is RDC taking a kick in for dragging the heels. And you think, well, it's not, because you've got so much stuff floating around, haven't you? You know, they've got, you know, they have things to deal with the same as once an application is granted, there might be, you know, 27 conditions on, you know, bats and newts and biodiversity and all this lot. And some of the times it seems that it's almost impossible for someone to get enough offset of biodiversity on their bit of land because it's not big enough. You know, and it just seems a sort of a crazy thing. If someone wants to build an extension and they haven't got a big enough garden to offset biodiversity, so they've got to sort of try and offset it somewhere else. And they sort of drag out, but it's not necessarily our fault. Yeah. Anybody else got any thoughts? Councillor Cook.
I wonder how many, what percentage of our major and non-major applications actually are given extension of times. I think that would be quite an interesting statistic as well.
Yeah, at the moment, because of delays that we've had in validation applications, it's probably the majority of applications, to be fair. And what I would say, I think there's a difference when it comes to major planning applications. You know, the bigger schemes, and Councillor Osborne, you mentioned one. You know, most applicants and agents know that it takes longer than the standard 13 or 16 weeks. I think where it's different is when you've got householder applications, where really we should be determining them within the 8-week time frame. But I do want to say it is a useful tool for us to have. Imagine if you're a householder and, you know, there's a tree that's affected and we need a tree report. You know, would you rather we refused your application in 8 weeks, or would you rather not have to pay a further fee, wait another 3 weeks while you commission a tree report? So they do have to be used appropriately, but at the moment it is the majority and we do need to bring it down. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Barnes, John?
Yes, in a curious way, I think particularly P6 might have a very perverse effect. And I personally have always thought that target was unsustainably high. I would be happy to wipe that one out because I think it's actually in the interest of the householder to agree an extension of time. I'm trying and struggling to think of a possible substitute because everybody knows we are overusing these at the moment. Somehow we want to deter that, but I can't think of a target which would do it, which is easy to phrase. I'm more chary about the major applications because although I think it's very sensible to agree extension of time, and the timescale is, I think, unbelievably tight at the moment, nevertheless, they're the ones that are actually crucial to delivery of our housing target. And therefore, I think we need to keep a certain pressure up on major. Maybe we could look at how often we use the extension of time. Do we use it more than once with a major application? There may be something we could do around that which will keep the pressure up, but yet recognise that the government's target is unbelievably tight.
Would it not be the case that if as Mike said, did I get it right, that you're waiting for the government to come forward with the target? So in the meantime, if we was to say P5 and P6 disappeared, if we said we got rid of those, and then once the government come up with what the target and timescale should be, then that's the one we should work to, isn't it? Rather than trying to work to our own, which is impossible, if you like.
Do you want me to respond to that, Chair? Sorry. Yeah, yeah, I think that is a good idea, and I do just want to mention that P1 to P4, 3 out of 4 of them are more stringent than what the government has at the moment anyway, so it is open to us to sort of, you know, when the government do come forward with something, it is open to us to sort of maybe go slightly more stringent than that. What I would say is the use of extensions of time, you know, we can meet whatever's determined, but the more stringent it is, and this is also the case for the government as well, the more stringent it is and the more they reduce it, we will be refusing more applications. And it's not just us that will be doing that. It'll be, if that's rolled out across England, that'll be every planning authority, because it will come to the fact of, you know, everything's okay apart from 2 things. We haven't got any more time. We're going to refuse it, and that's not in anyone's interest. I would suggest it's not in the interest of delivery of housing. It's not in applicants and agents' interest. But it is also incumbent on us as a service to monitor the time that we're taking on these things. So yeah, I would suggest that obviously P1 to P4 stay and P5 to P6 are removed until we find out what the government's new metric is. Thank you, Chair.
And the other one that I'm going to highlight is the missed bins. Still really good, because there basically aren't any. Can I ask on the fly tips, have we still got NES are still working for us, or have they disappeared? Anna's looking consumed. So.
Yeah, maybe we can check with Richard Parker Harding. He's online. Yeah.
Richard, is that one you could answer? Does NES still exist, or have they disappeared?
NES still exists, but our agreement with them ended on the 31st of August. So we will be going out to tender again for the full contract, but at the moment our agreement with NES has come to an end.
Right, okay, thank you. Maybe we shouldn't put that out too much, we'd be dumping their crap everywhere. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. This is a sort of general comment that where we've got performance monitoring, I think it is very important that we do get rid of the traffic light at red if it's something we can't achieve, or it's something that the government have moved a target on. We have reviews of KPIs. I'm not too sure when our next one is due, but certainly I would applaud the fact that this is a very good forum to not just look at the performance against the indicator, but to look at the indicator and see if it's still fit for purpose as situations develop, especially at the moment in housing and in planning. Situations are developing all the time. So I think it behoves this committee, and I hope we do rather well, at, as I say, not only looking at the performance against the target, but look at the target and its current relevance. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas, Richard.
Very, very interesting what Councillor Burns said there, and my question's in the same area, basically. It's interesting in what you had to say, Mike, about some of our targets being more stringent than the government's. Whilst we still have the autonomy to set our targets ourselves, would you be in favour of relaxing those targets somewhat if you say that implementing them means you've got a greater risk of the planning application being turned down? Wouldn't it make sense then to relax them? What's your opinion on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think my opinion on P1 to P4 is that they're perfectly appropriate and we can manage them, and that's what the government really need to see. And that's what I want the planners to focus on. My opinion, to hopefully give you an honest answer, to P5 and P6 is that they're unnecessary and they do get in the way of our delivery, whilst accepting we do need to reduce the extensions of time. Thank you.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you. I wrote to Richard Parker Harding regarding some of the fly tipping targets, and I had the most amazingly interesting response from him. He explained that N5 was specifically the number of fixed penalty notices issued for fly tipping, and N4 was the number of fly tips cleared from public land. But an astounding amount of fixed penalty notices were issued, including 1,132 for cigarette butts, 4 for public urination, and 17 for dogs not on leads. I'm quite happy to share the information that Richard has passed on to me with the rest of the committee if they would be interested, because it does make very interesting reading. But I think what is particularly interesting is that we did get £28,000 of income from that. I understand from a conversation I just had that there were slight issues with getting that income, but I do think it's something that, you know, it certainly has improved our district, and I think it may be something that we should perhaps look at encouraging and continuing.
Yeah, I will say on fly tips, whenever I've reported them, they are literally gone, usually within 24 to 48 hours. They're really, really quick. Yeah, really, really good on that. Councillor Burton.
Yes, continuing with the environmental health N5 and noticing that for this quarter there have been no fines issued, and I'm not quite clear how it works with the data that Councillor Cook has given, but this comes back possibly to what our KPI is, because it sounds like they've been very busy, but here it says no, or they haven't done any fines. So maybe this is an opportunity to revise what the KPI is, because it is just as valuable. The small stuff is just as valuable as the big stuff, the fly tips, is my comment.
Do you want to come back on that, Anna?
Yeah, the fly tip fines, this is where they look for evidence. So, and with any fly tip, there'll be officers on site looking to see if there's any way that we can trace the people that have done the fly tips, or, you know, who the resident is or the business is. So we check every single one. So I think this reflects that there isn't the evidence there to be able to do it, or we haven't been able to find it. I think when people fly tip, they're often quite sophisticated and quite good at covering up what they're doing.
Councillor Barnes, John.
Yes, one quibble and one comment on KPIs, which probably needs to be borne in mind when we get to the review. The quibble, it says there are no financial implications in this report, and yet there is a shortfall of 41,000. Not a huge amount, but given that we are actually heading for a deficit this year greater than we budgeted for, I think to say there are no financial implications is something which needs to be borne in mind by Anna's team. If there's a shortfall of income, that is definitely a financial implication, given our budgetary situation. The other one, which isn't in our KPIs at the moment, but I'm told by a number of colleagues on parish councils that they're increasingly bothered that we're not really successfully carrying out our street cleansing programme. There are good reasons, I think, for that in some ways, but nevertheless, I would like to get a handle on that, how successful we are, and why sometimes we can't do it. And I think probably I'll ask for that to be looked at when we get to the annual review. Thank you.
Anna, if you want to come back.
Yeah, just to say I take on board your comments about the financial reporting. It is quite early in the financial year, so it's expected to be about £40,000 down, but we are still quite early in our programme of reviewing all assets, and it is important to remember that we did a 2% uplift this year on the income, so there's a bit of a stretch for this financial year. About the street cleansing, again, we do check the street cleansing, but obviously take on board your comments from the parish councils. I can never say it properly, but the KPI we've got about the detritus, that covers street cleansing as well. So that's where it's checked 3 times a year to see. It's an independent check, so it's not checked by the contractor. It's checked by somebody completely independent, and they go out in various places and they check to see how clean the area is.
Can I just ask, do the telephones work now? Because it was a bit awkward. So hopefully that's back to scratch. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to update the meeting that H2, the missing data on the average cost of placing households in temporary accommodation, that's £913 per quarter one. We had a few glitches getting that to you in time, but it's there now.
Right, so we're all happy with the KPIs as they are? Yeah? Anna, do you want to come back?
Just on receipt of that information, that would be a massive green tick in that area, because so that's another really good bit of performance. Yeah.
It needs a caveat though. We do, because of the way the number is collated, Q4, because of accruals and the system accruing, it can sometimes look a little more positive than a net position at year end. So just to flag that. So Q4 always looks worse than it actually is, and Q1 often looks a bit better than it actually is. So we're sort of, that figure is in line with where we want to be at this point. But as Alan was saying, in regards to income, in Q1, the quarter one's notoriously difficult because there's so many variables that haven't quite bedded in yet. We should have a better idea in quarter two.
So just a small green tick and not a really massive one. Richard.
Chair, do we want to reflect as a committee the view which Mike Hughes expressed about 2 KPIs? Do we want as a committee to say that we think that's worthy of consideration?
Yeah.
Let's do
we're
that.
happy to take out P5 and P6. Yep, and wait for the government to come up with something. Yep, cool, okie dokie. Someone want to move the, what we got to do here? Resolve, Overall Scrutiny Committee, consider these findings and recommend any actions to Cabinet as necessary. So basically our action to Cabinet is remove P5 and P6.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose that, but with the removal of P5 and P6, we accept this KPI. To Anna, as always, for her lovely, well-presented report. Thank you.
Cute and a seconder. Oh, Councillor Legg. I'll go for a seconding. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anna. Next one, item 7, budget monitoring 25-26, revenue, capital and savings targets monitoring, capital 1 update members of on the revenue and capital budget monitoring position for quarter 1. This report also summarises the position to date on delivery of the target savings for 25-26, and it's resolved that this committee reviews the report, makes any recommendations to Cabinet as necessary. Charlotte.
That was a mouthful, wasn't it? Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is the quarter 1 budget monitoring position for revenue and capital, and we've got a early stage update on the savings targets as well that are in year. Starting with the revenue position, you'll recall that the 25-26 budget was set on a basis that £694,000 would need to be funded from reserves. We are currently forecasting a £250,000 overspend this year. That's a fairly modest overspend, however, does add to that position that will need to be taken from reserves It would increase that position to 944,000 at year end. All the key variances are highlighted in the report in section 6, but just to draw on a few key areas, we are experiencing a decrease against budget on planning income, currently forecast around about 119,000. That is an improvement on last year's position, but still down against the budget target. Conversely, parking income is performing well this year. We have had a lovely summer, so we've got a £50,000 gain being reported on that. We do have some pressures in year from consultancy and interim staff costs, and they are generating some overspends within the organisation, particularly within the estates team, where we have around about £300,000 forecast. That is being offset by vacancies within that team, but the cost still exceeds the vacancy saving. We have got a few other pressures within asset management in relation to voids, additional urgent repairs, that is partially being offset by some additional recharges that we've been able to recover. But we are somewhat adrift from our budget targets in that area currently. Moving on to the capital programme, this is largely in line with the outturn position, which was reported fairly recently to yourselves. There is some slippage in the programme. That's really the only movement in the programme. And that's highlighted in section 12 of the covering report, largely related to some slippage for the waste vehicles and related to the plan for neighbourhoods budget, also anticipated to be delivered slightly later than the previous programme. In terms of the savings programme, that is included in Appendix C of your pack, which is page 135. We have got a fair proportion of green already, but it is a very early stage of the year, so you'll see that the dominance of items are currently amber, which is where the item is either forecast to be partially delivered or we're still working on being able to deliver it fully. I'd just like to highlight the reserves position to members. As I touched on at the beginning, we were utilising some of our general reserves to balance the budget for 25-26. So we had at the beginning of this financial year £5 million in our general reserve. That's the reserve we can use for any purpose that we haven't earmarked for specific purposes. If this was the outturn position, that would utilise 944,000 of that, which would leave us with just over £4 million. However, I have noted in the report that there are a couple of capital schemes where there have been recent cabinet decisions. I've noted there the worst case scenario, but there is a potential need to write off some costs in respect of those schemes. And in addition, and this one is a certainty, we had an investment with an entity called Hermes Property Fund. That has recently been returned to us because that fund is no longer operating. The Audit Committee have had several updates over the last year or so on this position, and I'm happy to go into it in more detail if the committee's keen to hear about it. But that has given rise to a £420,000 loss, which we will need to take in year. If those things all came to crystallisation, that would take our general reserve position down to 2.8 million. As I said, on the capital schemes, we've got a bit more work to do to be certain on that. And of course, it is an early stage of the financial year. The reason I highlight that is, one, obviously it's important for members to be aware, but we will also be bringing to the next Overview and Scrutiny Committee the proposed budget challenge savings for 26-27. I think it's important that members have that context in mind when we consider those proposed savings for next financial year. I'll pause there, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody? Councillor Barnes. John.
Yes, there are a number of questions that sort of leaped to mind about this. The Town Hall Renaissance project, I'm slightly surprised this cost welling up now, because effectively that was abandoned before this financial year. And in a curious way, it's a sorry saga, because, as we know, financial regulations were broken, and I'm afraid also Cabinet were not kept informed as they should have been kept informed. So Internal Audit wrote a pretty scathing report about this one. There's nothing we can do about it, but it is a pretty major headache coming as it does this year, when the reserves were already under pressure from Hermes. It's probably worth this committee realising that over the years Hermes has actually delivered a positive outcome, even with this loss, capital loss. So on the whole, it was a good investment. But of course, capital values do go up and down, and this one has cost us in the end on capital value. Nothing we can do about that, but that is in a way what reserves are for. What's troubling, I think, is a fairly major red. We've had to postpone one of the savings programs to next year, which means that our saving program is going to miss the target probably by at least 100,000. I hope the ambers will all be delivered. But to end the year really, as we're now heading for, with the reserves down to 2.8 million, is getting very uncomfortably tight. I know our auditors say that you could go as low as 10%. Frankly, parish councils are advised to keep at least a third of their annual expenditure in reserves. We are actually spending 50 million at the moment. A third is about 5 million, and yet our reserves will be way below that. And I am worried, I must say, not just about Rother, but about the overall position when we get to the unitary authority, which are going to need every penny that they can muster, because we know very well the county had to save 50 million this year. So local government is facing a crisis. It's partly the fault of central government, and they certainly need to review. They really need a new Layfield committee. But I think it behoves us to try to get our financial house in better order before we hand over to county. And I know Lorna shares that view, but I thought it ought to be emphasised. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, you're on the call. Anything you wish to add?
Only that I think in one or two areas there's cause for optimism. So I would expect the car park situation to improve, because we've had another couple of good sunny months since the end of P3. So July and August were hot and sunny. So I would expect some more tens of thousands of extra income on those lines. Yeah, I share the concerns about the reserves. Bigger picture is the county is in serious trouble. The new unitary is going to start off with a deficit, but I suspect most new unitaries are going to start off with deficits unless the government does something about the social care position. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with the 3-year settlement that comes out at Christmas. It's going to be late now because the budget's going to be late, so I expect the 3-year settlement's going to, we've just been warned that the settlement is now going to be later than as originally expected. So that is going to be just before Christmas, and we will have to review the situation once we have the government funding for our final 2 years in place, and then we'll be able to assess whether we have enough in reserves to get across those 2 years or not.
Yes, sounded a bit stark, didn't it? End on a positive.
It's a reality, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Councillor Thomas, Richard.
You might have seen a very interesting article on BBC News, which said that of the district councils making up East Sussex, we actually have the lowest level of indebtedness, about half that of our companion councils. So that is on the positive side. So it's worth putting that into the discussion.
Chief Executive, Lorna?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. And what that report showed was actually we'd had the largest reduction in debt in the country, actually. Not in terms of size, but in terms of the percentage change. So I think we have been taking some responsible decisions. And I do take the point that Councillor Barnes makes about things like the Town Hall Renaissance project. And it's only until we had a different project that actually we could determine what needed to happen. So I think the savings that were achieved last year, trying to reduce our debt, our capital programme being deliverable, we have made the right decisions. And I think some of the councils around us are not necessarily taking that approach. But for us, it is absolutely about going into the new authority in the best position we can possibly be in. And I think some of the decisions that are coming are going to be quite tough and quite difficult for us to make, because it's very tempting, isn't it, to say, well, there's 2 years left. Let's just roll on and hope for the best. But I don't think we're in a position to do that, and we do need to make sure with the budget decisions that will come up for next year that we're, absolutely making sure that we're focused on the highest priorities for our residents, but also making sure we're being as efficient as we possibly can be. And unfortunately, there may be some things in next year's budget that are decisions that none of us want to take. But to make sure we're in a sound position, we will need to do that. And I think the process that Charlotte has taken us through this year to identify the budget savings for next year has been a really, really robust one, but it unfortunately doesn't give us what we need. So we're going to have to look further and deeper. And that's kind of a bit of a depressing message, but I do think we should sort of be really mindful of the path that we're on, and that we are making the right choices along that path. So, yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said there, Councillor Barnes.
Councillor Barnes, John?
Sorry, something that the Chief Exec has just said struck a chord in my mind. If we waited to take the Renaissance, Town Hall Renaissance, until we got a new project in place, I'm not quite sure why we're treating King Offa any differently. Because in some ways, if we're proposing to sell King Offa to the private sector, do we need to take the capital cost that we've expended so far on that project at this moment and take it out of reserves? Or can we actually float that over and recover it out of the sale price of the King Offa site?
Charlotte may be best placed to answer that, but as I understand it, that's expenditure that was on the project of the leisure centre. Is that right, Charlotte? Yes.
Yes, that's correct. So, yeah, I mean, just to confirm, I've put them in there, worst case scenario of what potentially we may need to write off. We do need to do a detailed exercise where we look at the individual lines of expenditure and exactly what was incurred, and are there any costs there which could still be associated with the revised schemes that are proposed. And if they are, then obviously we won't write off any costs that we don't have to write off. But I've put it out there because I think it's important that members understand that there is a likelihood that we will need to write something off. So yes, King Offa, in terms of the leisure centre, the new leisure centre, is in that mix in the same way. And the reason being that I bring it here now rather than previously is because the Cabinet decisions have only recently been made, and it's only at that point that there's a formal decision about the direction in which the council is moving in with those schemes. So that's the timing reason. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Cook.
Thank you. Could I have a little bit more clarity, please, about DCS 11? No, it's not the one I mean. Gosh, it's terribly small writing. DCS 12, about the parish council websites. I read that as you wish to increase it from £5,000 to £7,000 per annum, and you have 7 parish councils. If that's the case, surely you'd get a saving of 14,000, not 7?
I think what that means is that the range of savings was to be between 5 and 7. It was included in the budget target at 7, but we are currently not on track to deliver that saving. I will double check that with Mark tomorrow, and I'll correspond with the committee if I'm incorrect about that, unless anyone else has further information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So are we already charging 7 parish councils for their websites?
Anna advised me that we are. Yeah.
Joe?
I thought it might be helpful just to flag the work that's happening with the service and asset devolution framework, and that is in train. That will be coming back with updates in due course, but the net effect of that is hopefully to have cumulatively some savings to our revenue budget, which are currently not really featuring in the numbers, as I understand it. So that's something else too, as Andrew, I think, alluded to. It's not all bad news. There are some bits in here that could go either way, and while those may be quite modest in individual transfers or asset devolution, it cumulatively might come up to quite a bit.
Okay, right, well, we've got to review, this committee reviews the report and makes any recommendations to Cabinet as necessary. I don't think we've really got much to add, have we? Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a bit of detail for me, please, about the King Offer site, and I gather that quite a lot of work, survey stuff, and was done in the past in developing this scheme, and hoping that there is maybe some value in passing on some of the information. You've probably got that all in hand, but we're looking around for savings and as much as possible, and gaining, that's the other side of saving, isn't it? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. We will review everything that we have, and as I said, we would only seek to write off if there are no other avenues available to us.
So any recommendation to Cabinet as necessary? Basically state the obvious. try and save as much money as you can, basically.
Yeah, got it.
Right. Does someone want to move the recommendation? Councillor Barnes, you made most to say on it. Do you want to move it?
I will move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. And seconded, Councillor Byrne. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Last item on the agenda item 8. You'll see our next meeting, which is in a fortnight from today, is the local government reorganisation final submission, which I assume many members may sit in and watch and see this. We haven't got papers yet on this, obviously, because it's still running. But this will be what it says on the tin, final submission to whichever member of the government it goes to now. And then we're into October, where we have Durwell Pavilion Trust update, council plan update, state of the district report, draft budget, challenge proposals. So I'm trying to sort of think of one. We said we would have 2 meetings, possibly 2 meetings sort of online to save travelling over. The only one at the moment looks like the 27th of April, which is calling urgency procedures and draft annual report to council. So I suppose what we do, we play it by ear. We got here that the council plan update and state of the district report 25 will be moved to the October meeting. So there's that. Right. Yeah. Yeah, so, well, I think we're playing by ear. But the next meeting will be quite important. Like, possibly the most important meeting this council's had for 60 years, 50 years. Not quite that old. Yeah, Councillor Barnes.
The next meeting is potentially very important indeed. There is a rumour running around, which I hope can be authoritatively denied. The government may be thinking of abandoning its proposal. I hope, therefore, that all the work that has been done is not going to prove abortive. But I don't know whether the Chief Exec would want to say something about that rumour.
As far as I'm aware, that is a rumour. We have a new minister and we'll have to see the direction of travel from the new minister.
And I expect, after speaking to Keith Glazier last week a couple of times, excuse me, on this subject, where he was bemoaning the fact that he spent most of August talking about it and working on it with everybody else. He would probably be the last person who would want to see it abandoned. But there it is. Councillor Byrne. Terry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, with that in mind, and I don't want to put any extra onus on or extra work for officers, are we keeping a tab on how much officer time we have spent? Just in case we've got something to say, well, look, you've counselled it, can we have our money back, please? It's cost us this much in officer time pursuing something that didn't happen. Just strikes me that if that could be done without great overhead, that might be a very good thing to have in our back pocket if it does get cancelled. So monitoring the amount of time that has been, officers' time has been spent on local government reorganisation and putting a value on that might be good.
That really, but yeah, I mean, it has been an incredibly time-consuming process. It's taken a lot of senior officer time, but not just us. So that's absolutely right. I mean, we have a rough idea on roughly the amount of time and who has been working on it. The cost of putting together the business case was funded by the government. So that's one thing that has been covered. But in terms of time, and our capacity has been really, really stretched during that time. But I think, we haven't necessarily, we've tried to keep everything going, and I think that's important. So hopefully that has come across. And we'll just have to see what happens next. We are working to the timetable we have been given, and if there's any change, yeah, we'll have to take stock. But no, it's all coming to a head now. The papers will be published at the end of this week, the business case. We have a member briefing on Thursday, so I look forward to seeing you all online to be able to share the detailed contents of the business case. And yeah, we'll just have to keep going.
Can I just urge members to make sure and tune in on that member briefing, because it might be an important, it'll probably inform us quite well of what we've got to discuss in a couple of weeks' time. So there's that. Just one other small thing whilst we're all here. We have the sort of member pre-briefing on the Thursday before this meeting, but we've only, numbers have sort of tailed off a bit. Are we still sort of keen to do that? Councillor Cook.
I'd just like to say that having had that briefing on Thursday and being able to write and put those questions to our officers who have been extremely studious in responding to them, both verbally tonight and by email, I think that is a really, really rewarding process to go through.
Yeah, don't disagree. John?
The Thursday briefing is absolutely fine, and I think a lot better than meeting at 6. But I'm not so sure about bringing forward the starting date to 6, given our experience today, because of rush hour. If anything goes wrong, it's amazing how big a style-up is instantly created. So could we possibly think again about the starting time of 6?
I could counter that and say my trip over, Google told me it would take 42 minutes, and it took about 42 minutes. It was a doddle. And the ridge was almost empty. I just drove straight along. Thought, well, this is great. So
I think that's
it swings and
probably
roundabouts, isn't it?
I think it's antagonised by the A21 being closed, and Battle Hastings Road also being closed, because it means that when there was a snarl up, there's very little alternative, diversion to take. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get home tonight, to be honest, because the A21 will be closed, and Battle Hill is closed, and if the accident has had Lunsford hasn't been cleared, not quite sure where to go, really.
No, can't help you. Councillor Burton.
Yes, as a new councillor 2 years ago now, I found the meeting together, the pre-meet, very useful for, having greater understanding, preparing, rather than a fairly rushed half an hour before the meeting. I think it's a good, even if not everybody can be there, it's still very worthwhile.
Okay, we'll stick with it. Okay, right. With that in mind, I can declare this meeting closed. I'll go by the town hall clock at 29 minutes past 7. Don't know what that was. But anyway, there we go. Meeting closed. 29 minutes past 7.
Thank you, Chair.